Did you turn it on? Have you ever wondered what it means to heap coals of fire on someone's head? Have you ever wanted to heap coals of fire on someone's head? Have you ever felt like you had coals of fire on your head? Are the coals of fire for our enemies? Are we to do unto them before they do unto us? Are we supposed to sit around like a doormat and just let them slap us around? Should we ask them to put a little stank on it? The name of this message is Great Coals of Fire. Please stand and cover yourselves for the reading of our scriptures. For those of you who don't know, I'm tethered, so I cannot stand. It's not a command, it's just a tradition that we very much like because we know that Yeshua and his Talmudim did so. Okay, so our first scripture is from Meshalim, which is Proverbs 25:20. And it reads this way. Ma'adeh beged beyom kara hotz metz al naten veshar ba shirim al lev ra. The next one is Meshalim 25:21, Proverbs 25:21. It says, Im ra'ev sona aha ha'ahilehu lehem ve'im zamehash kehu mayim. That's followed by Meshalim or Proverbs 25:22. So we did 21:22, 20, 21, 22. It says, Iki gehalim ata hotel te rather al rosho va yave yeshalem lach. And finally we have Tehillim or Psalm 140:10, which says, Yimotu alehem gehalim ba'esh yapilim be'mahamarot bal yakumu. All right, you may be seated. Okay, so we begin with Meshalim or Proverbs 25:20. And our first word is ma'adeh, which is take away. This word is in Hebrew, which of course you know means nothing if you speak English and don't know anything in Hebrew. But it's just a grammar thing. It's not terribly important. There's no way for me to really explain what that is, but just we know that it's in Hebrew. The word itself is to remove, to put away. And remember, this is take away in English. It's as of a garment, to take away this garment that I just did that. Let's put that where it can't be seen. All right. So I just took away that garment. Pretty good object lesson, I think. Specifically, it's to take something off of someone or off of something. So you could take that talit off of myself as I did, or I could take a blanket off of a bed, that type of thing. It's from the root adah, which is to pass by, to attack in a hostile manner. In other words, an enemy. It's to make Passover. In other words, to put on ornaments to adorn oneself with anything. So there's some various different uses, but fundamentally we're talking about taking something off as in a garment. Of course, then the next word is beged, which is a garment. It's a covering, a cloth with which anything is wrapped up, used of a coverings of a bed. A garment, usually the outer garment of the Hebrews. In other words, the talit, this thing I'm wearing right now. That's what they're talking about. It's from the root bagad, which properly is to cover, hence to act covertly, to do something under the cover of darkness. You think of spy stuff. But it's also used of being fraudulent, being deceitful. And in Hebrew, verbs of covering or hiding are often applied to fraud and deceit. To cover, to clothe, to defraud, you're covering up the truth in some way, you're defrauding somebody by lying to them, by hiding the truth, so that's how that's used. This is beyom, it's in day. The day, the primary signification appears to be the heat of the day, a period of time. It's as in the day when I took them by the hand, which is found in Yirmiyahu or Jeremiah 31:32. Now that day, by the way, was 40 years. The day they were in the wilderness was 40 years. So the first day in Bereshit, in Genesis, could have actually referred to a period of time lasting hundreds of millions of gadzooks trillions of years, as 24-hour periods would not have been possible given that the moon was not created until the fourth day. Yes, the days are actually in line with the scientific understanding of the hundreds of gazooks of millions of years that the first period was, and then the second and the third, and on and on. So a day is a period of time, not necessarily 24 hours, though it is used of a 24-hour period. Our next word is kara, which is a sound-alike word. It means to be cold. It's from an unused root, which is karar. An unused root means that this word was never used in the root position or from the basic root word, was never used in the biblical text. That's what they mean by it. So if you want to look it up, you have to look between number 7174 and 7175. It's in between those two numbers. You can generally find this root. But it's to be cold. It's even to be quiet. If your wife is being quiet because you forgot your anniversary, she's being cold. We have that in our world, don't we? Our next word is hometz, which is vinegar. It is from the root hamatz, which is to be sharp. It's even used of someone being eager, used with regard to taste. In other words, taste something that's sour. It's used of unleavened bread, of vinegar, of course. It is even used of something that's being salted. Uh, Probably all I need to say about that. The word that follows that is all in Hebrew, which means upon. It's something that's been placed on top of something else, as in my talit is upon my shoulder, or your house is built upon a foundation, that kind of thing. Our next word is nater, which is soap. It was vegetable alkali, which when mixed with oil is used even now for soap. It appears to be so called because when water is poured on it, it bubbles. So the picture is of bubbles, but they are speaking specifically of soap. It's from the root natar, which is to tremble, to palpitate as of the heart, to fall off, to fall away, especially with a fluttering noise. In other words, the sound made by leaves which fall from the trees when they are dry and withered, hence they fall away and the leaf flutters. So it's of the fluttering, it's of vibration, if you will. That's followed by veshar, which is and sing. It's from the root shar, which is to sing. It's of a person or thing celebrated in a song. It's to sing in anyone's honor, to celebrate in song. Basically, it's to sing. It is also sometimes used for to pronounce with a loud voice. Very common in Judaism because when they would read the scriptures, sometimes they would sing the words, or when they made announcements, sometimes they would sing the announcement. So it was actually common in their culture way back when. Probably find traces of that in modern culture as well. Uh, Now, Meshalim, or Proverbs 25:20, which is, of course, one of our words, it says singing songs to a heavy heart. In other words, singing joyful songs to a person who is depressed. If what they say heavy heart, it's idiomatic in the Bible of someone who's depressed or just down. Not well, still it's depression, even if it's a light depression. All right, so our next word is bashirim, which is in songs. It is from the root shir. So it's basically the same thing, but it is a little different. It's songs and singing. It's of a singer. It's of a choir. Also used of instrumental music. So even though no one's singing, the music in effect is singing. It's a song most sacred and common, especially joyful, and a most excellent song, it says in the Jacinius. Our next word is all in Hebrew, which is that upon something, it is set on something, it has a foundation, if you will. And then our next word is lev, and that's your heart. The heart is the central point of the blood and the seat of life. It often means the soul, the seat of the senses, affections, and emotions of the mind, of various kinds of love. It is applied to the mode of thinking and acting, a sense in which a pure heart is ascribed to anyone who follows the laws of the Torah faithfully, and on the contrary, a perverse heart of stubborn and double-minded men who are said to speak with a double heart. It is the seat and the will and purpose, intellect and wisdom. It's also ascribed to the heart, understanding. Metaphorically, it's the middle part or the interior, the middle, right? Um, Now, remember, this is Hebrew, so if you're translating this particular word, you always just say heart, because in Hebrew, the heart, uh, a noun is just a noun. You never describe a noun. That's a lot of people get caught on this one. I used to myself. Got in trouble for it many times. So don't feel so bad if you get caught on it yourself. The other thing to note about this, something else I wanted to say about the heart. What was it? Oh, in Hebrew, the heart and the mind are one and the same thing. I know they will say the heart and the mind and the soul and all these other things, but the heart and the mind is one thing. The heart, the mind, and the soul, that's all one thing. So if your heart says yes, your mind says no, in Hebrew, in biblical Hebrew, you're suffering from schizophrenia. Keep that in mind. Then our next word is ra, which is of course evil. And there's, I don't think it's just a coincidence that Ra, being the sun god in the Egyptians, is the god the word that means evil in Hebrew. I think they borrowed this from the Egyptians, to tell you the truth. Very, very possible. All right, but it's evil physically. It's as of an animal, bad cattle, bad waters, wicked or evil, of a manner of thinking and acting. We've already heard that about something positive, right? Of love, it's a manner of thinking and acting. And evil in Hebrew is a manner of thinking and acting. Specifically, it's noxious, it's hurtful, uh, evil in appearance, deformed, unhappy, unfortunate of a person, sad of the heart and mind. And that's very important for us to understand that to the Hebrews, evil, if you distorted your face in anger, you are committing evil. It wasn't just of yelling at someone or cussing them out or beating them up or whatever. It was just the showing your face in anger was considered evil. All right, so here's my translation of Meshalim, or Proverbs 25:20. Removing a garment on a cold day and vinegar on soap is like singing songs to an evil heart. Still doesn't make much sense, does it? Here's a note that I found in the Jewish Study Bible. I'm not talking about, I don't remember that guy's name, David Stern. No, not his thing. I'm talking about the actual Jewish Study Bible. If you don't have it, you should get it. This is what it looks like. it it says the Jewish Study Bible on that side. This is put out by Oxford, I think. Let me look. Jewish Publication Society, Tanakh translation. It says, um, yeah, Oxford University Press. That's the book I'm talking about, not that thing that David Stern put together. So in it, it says, as it stands, the proverb offers two images: undressing in the cold, which you think of it, you would get goosebumps and stuff like that because it would make you cold, and pouring vinegar on soap, as we know that causes bubbles. Uh, to these are compared the effect that cheerful music has on a melancholy person. So if you're melancholy, somehow singing to you will give you goosebumps and make you feel bubbly. According to them, the first action causes a chill, the second causes fizzing and hissing, which may suggest irritation and incompatibility. Okay, may I disagree agreeably here? So, according to the JSB, don't sing to your enemy, don't make your enemy sing for his meal, right? What? What? Do you think if people would sing songs to ISIS, they would calm down and let their captors go? For that matter, Would singing songs to Isis give them chills, or would it make them boil in anger? Well, David played music for Shaul, you're saying. It's not the same thing. To sing a song to an enemy is idiomatic for don't insult your enemy. Don't sing and dance around with his intelligence. In other words, don't patronize your enemy. It'd be one thing to patronize somebody you know, it's a totally different thing to patronize your enemy. So, what should we do? Well, I'm glad you asked. Let's move to the next verse, which is Mishalim or Proverbs 25:21. We begin with the first word, which is im. That makes it interrogatory, makes it if. Then the next word is ra'ev, which is hungry, stricken with hunger. It's from the root ra'av, which is to hunger. The primary idea appears to lie in that of an ample stomach. In other words, a completely empty stomach, used of men and animals both. Oh, we follow that with sanaha, which is enemy you literally, but it's your enemy. So it's from the root sane, which is to hate, whether persons or things, a hater, an enemy. Then we have ha'ahilehu, which is make, eat he, very literally. So make him eat. It's cause him to eat, to consume or devour, especially to give food to someone, to feed them. It's to cause someone to eat is not so much to give them food, it's to give them prepared food so they can actually eat it, right? That's to cause them to eat. If you give them food, you cause them to have, if you give them uncooked food, you cause them to have uncooked food. If you cook the food, that you've caused them to eat. I think that's important to understand. The root word, of course, is ahal, which is to eat, to devour. It is used not only of men, but of animals. To eat a land, a field, a vine is used for to eat its produce, to eat its fruit. Then, of course, this is lachem, which is generally translated as bread, but it's food, both of men and animals, especially bread, of course, wheat and of flour, because back in that day, back in that biblical time, that was the main staple. That was mostly what you ate. Meat was not something you ate a lot. You'd have to be really wealthy to have, meat and potatoes with every meal. They just didn't live the way we live. Bread was the staple. So it gets tied in with bread. But you think about it, it's like, come on, let's get together, we'll break bread. It doesn't mean we're actually going to break bread. It just means we're going to have a meal. All right, so then it says ve'im. Remember, im is the interrogatory, it's the word if. So this is and if. Then it says zame, which is thirsty, especially like a desert is called a thirsty land because it's dry. It's from the root zama, which is thirst. It's to be thirsty, metaphorically, to desire eagerly any person or thing. So they use that of a desire. You know, a man talking about a woman he's falling in love with may say, "My soul thirsts for her." That's what they're talking about. All right. So our next word is hashkehu, which is make, drink he, literally. So it's make him drink. In other words, you don't give him a bucket of water. You give him a glass of water. They, drink something. Nothing wrong with giving somebody a bucket of water, but you ought to throw in a glass of so they can drink it, right? Cause them to drink. Furnish the drink. It's to water animals, to irrigate the land, to water something. It's from an unused root. In other words, the root of this word was never used in the biblical text as shaka, but you remember, you still need to know what the root is because you got to get to the picture of what you're talking about. And the root is to drink, it's to irrigate, to give drink, to furnish drink. It's of a butler or a cupbearer, someone who's bringing you the water. It's to water cattle. Basically, it's the same thing. So then we have mayim. And now that's water in plural, so it's waters. It's from the root which is pronounced me or mo. Uh, it means the same thing. In biblical Hebrew, the different sounding vowels didn't change the word. Today, you change the vowel and you change the word altogether. But in biblical Hebrew, that didn't have that effect. So it doesn't matter if you say it's from me or if you say it's from mo. It doesn't really even matter how it's spelled because it can be mem vav for mo, or it can be mem bob aleph for mo. Either way you go, it's still to flow. It's a flowing water, so it's waters. So here's the translation of Meshalim of Proverbs 25:21. If your enemy is hungry, give him food to eat, and if he is thirsty, give him water to drink. We are not being told to give our enemy things to appease him. We need to understand we are not appeasing our enemy. We are being told not to insult our enemy's intelligence. Remember, that was the first verse. Don't tell him he needs job opportunities and better education so he can feed his family, and that should excuse his murderous ways, like our president just did. If he knew the Torah, he would have known not to do that. Feed his family instead the food they need for their bodies, not the food they need for their souls. In this case, it's what they need for their bodies. Don't be shoving Jesus down their throat. Feed them. Give them water. Our next verse is Meshalim or Proverbs 25:22. So we've done 20, 21. Now we'll do 22. So we begin with the first word is ki. That is for or because. Uh, And then our next word after that is gehalim, which is fiery coals, a live coal. Poetically, live coals are used for lightnings, used of punishment sent by God. And then they tell you to take a look at Tehillim or Psalm 140:11, which says, live coals upon the head. It's actually 140:10 in the English Bible, but it's 11 in the Hebrew. Live coals upon the head, a proverbial expression for anything very troublesome, which gives anyone very great pain and torment. Okay, this is very, very wrong. Jusinius was reverse engineering the Hebrew Bible, in case you don't know how that book came about. And he didn't get everything right. Why? Well, Jusinius grew up in a world where the God of the Old Testament was seen as mean and murderous, and the God of the New Testament was full of love. This is not about injuring your enemy. First, we feed our enemy in verse 20. Verse 21, we give our enemy water and give them water. Or first, in 20, you don't insult them. And then in 21, you feed them and give them water. And then the third thing now, you're supposed to hurt them. It doesn't make sense, does it? Why do we accept this kind of teaching? Well, because we believe in the Western world that God speaks out of both sides of his mouth. We really do. He says one thing and does another. He gives one people a law that can't possibly be lived by, and then he gives another people no law at all. It's very much like the way we were raised. I will never forget the day my mother, sitting there smoking her cigarette, told me I should never start smoking. Uh, and I was old enough at that point that I said something, well, but you're smoking, you know. And she said, I'll never forget it. Do as I say, not as I do. And when you're raised in a world where your parents say stuff like that, your governors and your senators, your congressmen in general, and your president do and say things like that, it's easy to understand how we can become a nation in a culture that believes God would do something like that. It's not true. They give Meshalim 25:21 as an example. They say, if your enemy hunger, feed him. If he thirst, give him drink. And then 22, it says, you will heap coals of fire on his head. Now, I'm taking this from the Jusinius, by the way. It says, in other words, so you will overwhelm him with very heavy cares, and he will be ashamed of his hatred against you. Here they've scratched on something that's very important for us to understand this. In like manner, it says, the Arabs say figuratively, coals of the heart, fire of the liver. These are Arab expressions, they say, to denote burning cares. So if something's really weighing on you, they'll call it a coal of the heart or a fire of the liver. So it's weighing on your heart and your mind, and it causes you to suffer from shame because you realize you've done something wrong, and so now you feel ashamed of what you've done, and so there's the fire of your liver and all that. I can't help but wonder how many more times Hamas, Hezbollah, and ISIS and other groups like them can force the wives and children of the Jew-hating Palestinians into schools and mosques where they have placed missile launchers, which of course gets the women and children killed, until the Palestinian brothers and husbands who lost loved ones to the barbaric practices of these groups, until they begin to hang their head in shame and realize they've been duped. These men were raised being taught to hate the Jews their entire lives, the Palestinians. Now, these radical groups are using the Palestinian women and children as human shields. They're putting them in these schools and in these mosques and telling them that they're going to kill them if they come out. And then they fire these rockets off. Israel shoots back to knock out the rocket launcher, because if you're going to stop them from shooting rockets at you, you need to stop the rocket launcher. And then all of those innocent women and children are murdered. Not murdered, they're killed. But it is murder by the ISIS and Hamas and those groups that are doing it. It's not murder by the Jews. The Jews are defending themselves. At some point, since the Jews are feeding the Palestinians and caring for their wounded, I think that the Palestinians at some point are going to hang their heads in shame and realize that they've been lied to their entire lives. That day cannot come soon enough. The next word is ata. It's the proverbial you, not you listening to me, not you who feels like I'm pointing at you right now. It's just you in general. Then it's hotel, which is heap. It's to take hold of, to seize. Always to fire. It's always used of fire or burning coals. So it's a heap of fire or burning coals. Then it says all in Hebrew, which is upon something that's on top of something else. And then it says rosho. Rosho, that's this thing right here, your head. His head more specifically. Hopefully at this point we all know that this is a Hebrew idiom and should not be taken literally, right? Okay. The next word is va Yahweh. It's and Yahweh. They're using the proper name of God. They're saying and Yahweh, calling him by name. Then it says Yeshalem. They have reward in English, but it's from shalem, which is to be whole. Sound like shalom to you? Of course it is. It's where shalom comes from. It's to be whole, sound, safe, to be complete, finished, to have peace, friendship with anyone. I hope you understand that in Hebrew culture, shalom, when they start saying to be complete, they're talking about you've learned the Torah, you apply it to your life, you live by the Torah, that makes you complete, that makes you whole. That's the thing that brings you peace in times of no peace for anyone else. When you know the Torah and you know you've lived it out the right way and you know you're on the right path, even in the times when they're peeling your skin off, laying you on a pole, or burning you to death, and all those things, you have that peace inside. You know that you're right with God and moments away from seeing him face to face. You have a peace that passes any and all human understanding. That's what they're talking about when they start talking about shalom in the Hebrew world. Then, of course, it's lach, which is to you. It's actually, if you're from Texas, you really get this. This is really y'all. You all. Y'all. Lach. It's not lechem to you. It's lach. It's to all of you. To y'all. All right, so here's my translation of Meshalim, Proverbs 25:22. For you will heap fiery coals upon his head, and Yahweh will reward you. Okay, I realize I haven't told you what the idiom means, but that was on purpose. So you'll heap fiery coals upon his head, and Yahweh will reward you. So will Yahweh actually reward us for setting someone on fire? A literal reading of the last two verses together will lead us to conclude that feeding and giving drink to our enemy is to place a fiery coal on his head. But Hebraically, heaping fiery coals on someone's head is to diffuse their anger. To diffuse their anger. More importantly, When we diffuse anger rather than act in kind, Yahweh will make us safe, sound, at peace, and complete. I need to take us on a sidebar for just a moment because someone out there is surely saying, but Robert, Tehillim or Psalm 140:10 says, shake burning coals upon them, and may they be cast into fiery whirlpools, never to rise up again. Sounds so horrible, right? All right, so it begins with Yimotu, which is shake. It's from the word mot, which is to totter, to shake, to turn from what is right is called shaking or wavering. It's to waver. Then it's aleichem, it's upon them. Something is on top of something else. So shake upon them, gehalim, burning coals. There's your live coal, the poetically used of lightnings for punishment. And I've already said this, that it's not right. It's that the coals of the heart, the fire of the liver, to something that's weighing on the mind. Remember all that stuff? It's the same word. Then it's ba'esh. It's in fire. And esh, well, that mimics the sound of fire. Shh, right? Fire, fever, especially of the fire of God, often used of lightning, also figuratively used of the anger and wrath of God. The grammar rule about passion doesn't apply here because the fire is connected to the coal and whirlwind, not a human. So it's not about passion in this case. Then we'll follow that with yapilem, which is to fall. It's to fall. The primary sense is to cause to fall, to supplant. It's to trip somebody, to push them over. It's to cause them to fall. Use of a man falling on the ground, or falling from a horse or a seat, falling into a snare even. All right, so Memahamorot is our next world. It's in whirlpools. That streams, whirlpools. It's from the root hamar, which is to flow in a rapid stream of water. It's as in rain, the rain coming down, you got this rapid stream. The original idea is no doubt that of making noise. It's the sound of the rushing water more than it is the water itself. So it's the noise that is created from the whirlpool. That's followed by the word Baal, which just means never. And then it's Yakumu. He raised, they literally, so it's they raise. Kum is to arise, to get up from a seat, to get up from a bed. We now know that shake burning coals upon them is a Hebrew idiom that means diffuse their anger, right? I told you that. So here's the translation of Tehillim, or Psalm 140:10. Diffuse their anger, and may they be cast into fiery whirlpools, never to rise up again. So more long-winded is diffuse their anger. That's the shaking burning coals upon them. And may they, who are the they? The people? No, they are the things that make people angry. Diffuse the anger, and may the things that make them angry be cast into fiery whirlpools, never to rise again. Knowing what the idiom means, we should understand that the writer of this verse is asking God to diffuse the enemy of his anger, and further, he is asking God to put that anger into the fiery whirlpools from which it never returns. Before I go to the translation, going back to the Hamas and all of them killing off the Palestinians' children and all that, if they finally hang their head in shame and realize that they've been duped by these other Arabs into believing something that was never true in the first place, uh, they may they may be nice to the Jews. But if that thing that made them mad in the first place isn't thrown into a whirlpool never to return, this whole thing could start all over again. How do I know that? Well, because most people don't know this, but in the early days of uh, the Muslim religion, in the very beginning, Muhammad was friends with the Jews. And then something happened, he got angry with them, and all of a sudden they were anti-Jew. And by the time you get to the time just prior to the Crusades, the Jews and the Muslims got along just fine. But then the Crusaders came along and raised that anger and that hatred back up and started it all over again. So that it wasn't thrown into whirlpools, never to return, because it's now returned 3 different times. Hopefully, if we all pray and keep this in our prayers, that will diffuse forever. Hopefully, at some point it will, and we won't ever have to see this again. So here's my translation. I've already done the translation, haven't I? Diffuse their anger, and may they the anger be cast into the things that cause the anger. All right, but here's my translation of Romans chapter 12, verses 19 through 21, which have a very reminiscent sound, if you will. Beloved, do not seek vengeance for yourselves, but give away your wrath. For it is written of Yahweh, who said, vengeance and recompense is mine. Of course, that comes from Deuteronomy 32:35. But if your enemy is hungry, give him food to eat. And if he is thirsty, give him water to drink. Of course, Meshalim 25:21, we just went through that. For you will heap fiery coals upon his head, and Yahweh will reward you. There's verse 22. Don't be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Again, heaping fiery coals upon someone's head was an idiomatic phrase which meant diffuse his anger. Thus, if your enemy is hungry or thirsty, we could feed and or give them drink, which will diffuse this anger. Go ahead, pray that God will diffuse your enemy's rage. In other words, heap coals of fire on your enemy's head, or that he will give you the wisdom to do so yourself. This idiom is much like Meshalim or Proverb 15:1, which says, a soft answer turns away rage, but hurtful words stir up anger. See, when you understand it right, there's no conflict between these verses, is there? Do you want peace in your life? One sure way to find it when your enemy is around is to diffuse your enemy's anger. Why? Because it's hard for a person to hate us when we diffuse or still his anger. Diffusing an enemy's rage can be as simple as feeding him when he is hungry. However, showing this kindness doesn't dismiss what our enemy has done. It doesn't change the past, but it may just change our future. Shalom, Veshalom.